Hi humans, it's still Hannah with some cozy winter book recommendations, and I would like to apologize for the voice, for my face not being able to move very much. I'm limited in my emotional range with my face, with my features, and I'm on a lot of painkillers, so I'm going to attempt to make this as clear as possible. Anyway, I have a wide range of books to recommend. They're not too many, but they're just really varied in taste, I think. And they're just the kind of book that you would, you know, the cliche of curling up with a book in like cozy winter times. This is it. By the way, I am just noticing how weird I look in the viewfinder, but I'm just going to pretend I don't see that so that I don't get too self-conscious. Anyway, the first recommendation is the Inheritance Games trilogy, and this has very regularly been compared to Knives Out, and I see why. Because we follow this random girl who has been left a major inheritance by this rich man who she has never met, and she doesn't know why. And everyone in his family, including all of his grandsons and his children, have been written out of the will. And so the condition for her to receive this inheritance is that she has to spend a year in the house, in his mansion, which is technically now hers. And so she's kind of navigating this minefield around his family because some of them are really not happy that she got the inheritance, and she's kind of in danger at this point. But she also really wants to know why he left her this inheritance because she has never met the guy. And so you follow really cool puzzles and clues being left everywhere, and it is really fun. It's really binge worthy. It's so addictive. I understand why this series is so popular. It's just so good. It's just so entertaining, and I would definitely recommend this. Book 3 is out, but I'm waiting for the edition that matches the ones that I have in paperback. But honestly, if you want mystery and just kind of like really over-the-top drama, I think this is perfect for this winter. Oh, and this is by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Next is a book I unfortunately don't have on me right now, and sadly most of these I don't have right now with me, but it is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helen Hanff. And this is a nonfiction, and it is a correspondence between Helen Hanff, the author, and people in this bookstore in London. It was, what time period was it? It was really long ago. It was in the 70s, I think. No, this was published in the 70s, so I think the correspondence was well before it. And you kind of see her extravagant character in her letters and her writing, explaining to them, hey, I can't find these books in the US. Do you have this specific edition? And she kind of gives you insight into her really peculiar and specific reading taste, and that's just really sweet. And I think it's, in a way, it has that theme of being a books about books, but the main focus of the story is the correspondence. She basically collected a few of the correspondence she had between her and this store in London at 84 Charing Cross Road. That's the address. And the relationship she builds between a lot of people at the store, and more specifically this one person who has been leading the correspondence. And it's really sweet, it's really wholesome, and I don't know what it is. There's just something about, I think, reading about old-timey letters being sent back and forth between not only two countries, like between two continents, asking for books, and like enclosing this amount of money in a little letter, and like waiting for the book to come back, and then them sending her books and having like a little what's the word, like opening, I can't think of the word, like when you open a running account for someone, you know, when like they open a tap for her essentially, but I can't remember the word for it, and they are so trusting that she will mail them the money. There's just something about it that's really, really sweet, and I really enjoyed that book, like a lot more than I anticipated enjoying it. But I definitely recommend it if you want a nonfiction, real stories or real correspondence between people. If you enjoy books written in the format of letters, I think that is a really cozy read. Next recommendation is if you're looking for a fantasy read, and more specifically a fantasy series. And for that, I will recommend the Mirror Visitor Quartet by Christelle Dabo. This is a work translated from French, and it is translated by Hildegard Surla, something like that. These are books 3 and 4. I don't have books 1 and 2 on me right now, they're elsewhere, but the first book is called A Winter's Promise, and both the first books take place in freezing cold conditions, so they're definitely, I think, very atmospheric and suitable for the season. But we follow a world that has been broken into these floating spires, and each spire has been it has kind of become its own little arc. They call them arcs, and on each arc different people reside with different powers, and our main character Ophelia resides on the arc of Anima, where they animate objects, but she specifically also has the ability to touch objects and read their history kind of by who touched them, and she can also walk through mirrors, which is an even rarer gift. And they kind of end up marrying her off to someone on another arc for political reasons, but she doesn't understand why she's been chosen. She doesn't understand what the political reasons are, and she's just being used as a pawn in this massive game that is so beyond her even imagination and comprehension of what's going on. And it is fascinating. Like, first 2 books especially, I think, are the best. Like, last 2 books are good too, but the first 2 books especially, insane. And like I said, they're really, really winter appropriate for the theme, and I think it's just so imaginative and complex as a plot, as a world, as a magic system. Everything is just, the magic system isn't too complicated. It's more the history of what happened, why the world has become the way it is, how it has divided, how people have gotten their powers, where these powers came from, all of that, the history of it, and the politics of the world and how it's operating. So fascinating. So I definitely really recommend the series if you're looking for something like that. And then if you want a fantasy but not a series, I would recommend Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. And when people tell you, oh, it's like such a great fairy tale for winter, I see why. You have like a fae element, and so our main character, her father lends money and he's not really good at collecting the debt, and so instead she kind of takes charge, and she starts bragging about how she can turn silver into gold because she's so good at her job. And a fae king hears her, and from that perspective, it's a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. And so she is kind of forced, she's kind of kidnapped essentially. Is that what it is? She's kind of threatened by that fairy king that she has to turn his silver into gold. And you follow her perspective, but 2 other female characters' perspectives as well, and their timelines intertwine, and it's a really interesting female lead story where all 3 women kind of are thrown into their own kind of crap, and they have to sort it out, and they have to take charge and fix things and just kind of be their own heroes because no one else is coming for them. And it is definitely very cold. It is in the winter, and the fae people live in, I think, a snowy forest or something. It's really fascinating. It's really interesting. It has this magical fairy tale element, so it's not as clear cut. It's more kind of whimsical, and I actually really enjoyed it. So I would recommend that if you want a standalone fantasy. Sticking to retellings and mythology in one, if you are on the bandwagon of Greek retellings and myth retellings in general, maybe you would be interested in Nordic tales and Nordic retellings, and for that I would recommend Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. This is not my favorite work by Neil Gaiman, but it is very suitable for the winter. And if you want a more adventure-filled story by Neil Gaiman, I would recommend Neverwhere. I think it's suitable for winter. Like, it's maybe not the perfect book for winter, but it's just really, I don't know, it has a lot of adventure, and so if that's what you want for your winter reads, then check out Neverwhere. But for this one, it is his literal retellings of Norse mythology, or he just kind of, he tells you the stories, and it's not, my issue isn't with his retelling, it's that the stories are so ridiculous because stories about gods tend to be really ridiculous, and I think he really leans into that. I think it's cool that he acknowledges how absolutely absurd their actions were, like people like Thor or Loki or all these other gods. They would behave in the most absurd of ways, and they would just kind of disregard human lives. And I think Neil Gaiman really leans into the ridicule and the absurdity of these stories with his own tone, which if you've read Neil Gaiman, you know that his tone is already really ridiculous and absurd, and there's like a kind of, not sarcasm, there's kind of a sarcasm to it. There's just like a wackiness and quirkiness to it, and I think it really fits this book especially, and it really enhances how just these gods were behaving, right? So if you're someone who's just really used to Greek retellings or are wanting to expand beyond just Greek retellings, because I know they're the most popular ones, if you want to read about other mythology pools and retellings, then I would definitely recommend Norse mythology. I feel like I could have explained this better, but I'm not, you know what, I'm not gonna try it again. I can't. I feel like I'm just going downhill, and the further I go into this video, the more my meds are just like really kicking in. I can see two over the camera right now, so I'm just gonna go on with the last recommendation, and it is Sharp Turn From There. If you want something that is murder, psychological thriller, mystery kind of situation, so not like the Inheritance games, I feel like this is more mystery as in like solving puzzles and stuff, whereas this book is The Overnight Guest by Heather Gutenkopf, and I would say this is more like psychological thriller in the sense of crime and whatnot. And so we follow this true crime writer, and she goes to a house where this horrible crime has been committed, and she goes to stay there to do research on her book. And she is isolated, the phone's cut off, the roads are blocked, she's snowed in. And I really like the synopsis part where it says, true crime writer Wiley Lark doesn't mind being snowed in at the isolated farmhouse where she's retreated to write her new book. A cozy fire, complete silence. It would be perfect if not for the fact that decades earlier at this very house, two people were murdered in cold blood and a girl disappeared without a trace. As the storm worsens, Wiley finds herself trapped inside the house, haunted by the secrets contained within its walls, haunted by secrets of her own. Then she discovers a small child in the snow just outside. After bringing the child inside for warmth and safety, she begins to search for answers, but soon it becomes clear that the farmhouse isn't as isolated as she thought, that someone is willing to do anything to find them. As you could tell from the description, it has that snowed in vibe. There's a cozy fire, but it's really creepy because she's kind of being haunted, and implications are that she is also being hunted at some point, and it's really cool. I actually gave this 5 stars, and I listened to it on audiobook over the summer, ironically over the summer, for like a really long trip that I was driving for, and I really recommend the audiobook. I think it was really well done, but I think reading it physically would also be good too. But I did enjoy the audiobook, and I don't usually grab fiction audiobooks, but I was driving, I needed something else, I wasn't feeling a podcast or music, and I actually really enjoyed it. Hopefully this was a wide enough variety. Surprisingly, I didn't recommend as many fantasies or sci-fis as I normally would have, or even middle grade. I didn't recommend any middle grade, but I will have a video of my middle grade book recommendations, like cozy middle grade book recommendations, if you are interested in that, linked at the end of the video. It's not on this channel, it's on the main channel when I was still posting bookish videos on there. But if you want to check that out, it'll be linked at the end and in the description box below and the cards above. But if you have any perfect for the winter book recommendations, cozy ones, please let me know in the comments down below. Especially if it's something like Legends and Lattes. I would really like, I didn't recommend Legends and Lattes just because if you haven't read it, I think you should, but everyone has probably read it or heard of it, so I didn't want to be repetitive. But if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe because that really helps me out a lot. And if you want more content, you can click either video on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one.